Hello friends, my name is Dave Cummings. I'm running for Congress here in District 18. Now, District 18 covers Martin County, St. Lucie County, and part of Palm Beach County. Some of you may not be acquainted with me, so I figured I would make this video to give you a kind of an idea of what my platform is. I would also like to hear from you about the things that are important. So let's talk about the first thing that's important to me, clean water. Now, clean water is an issue that we've all heard about. Every candidate runs on it. I was born and raised in Florida, and I grew up here on the Treasure Coast, and each and every candidate that's come along, Democrat or Republican, all say the same thing, but no one ever has a plan. I actually have a plan, and I'd like to show you what that plan looks like. But first, let me share with you why I love the water.
Lately I've been feeling different, like I've come from outer space, and I know there's something missing. When it's you I can't replace.
I feel like a pirate.
As I walk into the sun, and as I stare across this ocean, and as I start a brand new day, my life ever be the same again.
But friends, we have a problem. When the high rains come, water from Lake Okeechobee is dumped into our estuary. It takes with it a blue-green toxic algae, which comes from the phosphorus from the agricultural industry. It runs into our waterways and takes it over, suffocating everything in sight, including our fish, and also harms the other wildlife. One of the other problems is it kills off our seagrass, and when the seagrass is dying, then so do our manatees, and also the fish populations that dwell in the seagrass. which has a chain reaction to our dolphins and also to our waterfowl. Unfortunately, the problem doesn't stop there. The toxic algae goes out into the ocean and has shut down our beaches and harmed our economy. And what's worse is it's extremely toxic and dangerous to people. You can't swim in the water, and it also affects every other leisure activity on the water, including boating. And not only that, the worst part is that it harms our economy and also our property values, which are now plummeting. The Florida Realtor Association says property values have dropped significantly since the onset of this problem. And still our current representative has no plan. In fact, he's rated 23% as an environmentalist, and all we get is political theater. But friends, help is on the way. I have a plan, and I'd like to show it to you.
Now currently, the only plan on the table from any candidate, or anyone for that matter, is the plan to move the water south. Now, we've heard a lot about this, but what exactly does it mean? Well, essentially what the state of Florida wants to do is spend $1.6 billion of U.S. taxpayer and state taxpayer funds to build this reservoir south of Lake Okeechobee. Now, the problem is it will take 8 to 10 years to build, and honestly, they don't know if it will work. So we have to have another solution, at least in a temporary status. So what does this plan look like? Well, the plan comes in multiple phases. First a temporary solution, then a more permanent solution. So phase 1, we've all seen the deaths of manatees and fish in our estuaries. This is terrible. So how do we cure this problem temporarily at least? Well, first we utilize something called geotubes.
Geotubes are a high-grade filtration process which uses no chemicals. They can be set up in a matter of days, and as the water passes through them, it comes out the other side clean. This is really important because the contaminants can be caught inside the geotubes, and those can then be removed. As you can see from other locations, they work. This is why I think they would be a good temporary solution.
Now these geotubes are a high-grade filtration system. They're already approved by the EPA. We put them in place and we filter the water through them before it comes into the estuary. Phase 2 solution would be to build a permanent structure at the mouth of the C-44 canal.
The C-44 canal runs from Lake Okeechobee into the St. Lucie estuary. This is the primary source of the green algae. By catching it at the mouth of the waterway, we can solve this problem. Building a cofferdam or a desalinization plant could be the solution to this problem permanently.
And then phase 3, after the problem is solved at the C-44 canal, then we go to the estuary itself and maybe back towards the lake and do dredging. After all, if that contaminant is deep in the soil, we have to get rid of it.
Another benefit of the geotubes is they can be stretched along the property lines of the agricultural industry to catch any toxic runoff before it ever gets to the lake. They can also be filled with sand to reinforce beaches and our eroding coastlines.
Now friends, one of the next important issues to me is immigration. Immigration affects all of us here in the United States, but especially here in Florida. In our district, you may not know, but we actually have 2 sanctuary cities. In Jupiter, there's a place called El Sol, and we also have another one in Loxahatchee. Most people have never even heard of this, but it recently came to light when an illegal alien was driving drunk and killed 2 ambulance workers.
What makes the situation worse is politicians are taking big dollars from the agricultural industry who uses illegals for cheap labor. And this is happening at the expense of our own people. We've had a 30% increase in fatalities on the road that are caused by illegals. And sadly, many of them get away with it because they simply return to their old country.
This is completely unacceptable. One of the most important things we can do as a congressman is use the laws that are already in place to pressure our local folks to do the right thing and to obey the laws that are already on the books.
We can also require that E-Verify be implemented in our state because currently it is not required. We can also have a guest worker program if they don't have enough Americans to fill the jobs. This just makes sense.
So one of the other issues that's come up recently after a lot of these shootings have gone on is this attack on the Second Amendment. Let me be clear, I support the Second Amendment 100%. The Second Amendment is one of those things that's in the Constitution and it says shall not be infringed. But some people in office, they cave to pressure. They don't realize that it was a failure of government at every single level that some of these shootings have occurred. If we would strictly enforce the laws that are already in place, there would be no need to look and find more laws to pass.
In 1994, Bill Clinton signed the assault weapons ban, banning certain classes of weapons and high-capacity magazines. Unfortunately, it didn't work. But this isn't just my opinion. The Department of Justice said so after a lengthy study. And of course, the Columbine incident, the DC snipers, and several other mass shooting incidents proved that it was the case. But that's because criminals don't follow the laws to begin with, and citizens should have the right to protect themselves.
I think most people who know me know that the Second Amendment is something that's very important to me. The fact of the matter is I looked down the barrel of a rifle for the bulk of my adult life. And I believe that our country was founded with the intent for all Americans to have the right to bear arms. And I can tell you, I don't want to live in a country where criminals are the only ones that have access to guns. You know, during my military career, I've had to defend myself. I had to fire my weapon on the battlefield, and I don't believe that any person should become a victim or some statistic of violent crime because they weren't allowed to defend themselves or because they didn't have the ability to shoot back. And I would encourage our lawmakers who are out there calling for gun confiscation to take a look at some of the horrific events occurring around the world. Events like the Paris attacks or the attack in San Bernardino, the attack at Sandy Hook Elementary, or the Fort Hood shooter, Major Nidal Hassan. These attacks, they all could have been prevented were there people present who were prepared to defend themselves.
I can honestly say that my community and my kids in our schools, I don't think that they're made safer by the general population of civilians having unfettered access to the best weapon the Army could put in my hand to go out there and kill our enemies.
What the heck? Why such a sudden change, and why the lies and misinformation? Clearly civilians don't have access to military arms, much less unfettered. So what would make our congressmen sell out the Constitution? All you have to do is follow the money. Almost immediately after the Stoneman Douglas shooting, billionaire and prominent Republican donor Al Hoffman issued an ultimatum. He said that he will not fund any campaigns of any Republicans who do not call for a ban on assault-style weapons. In fact, Hoffman, who is a huge critic of Trump, said this point blank, yet if we look in the Hill, we find a quote from him. It says one elected official who he's heard back from is Representative Brian Mast. He says, quote, Mast seems to be Hoffman's first recruit. He proudly proclaims that Mast is with me. This gives an indication that we have a congressman who listens more to a billionaire who funds him than to the voters and the Constitution. What will he turn on next?
So let me be clear. I absolutely do not support additional and arduous laws on responsible gun owners and ammunition. So how do we prevent mass shootings, in particular at schools? Well, first of all, let me give you a background on myself. I have been a police officer for 5 years. In fact, I actually was confronted with a situation where a gunman entered a school and was able to stop him without a shot fired along with my team of officers. I also have a master's degree in Homeland Security, and I've been a teacher, so I understand this situation from every angle. So how can we stop these things? Well, first and foremost, we must harden our schools and have a single point of access. That single point of access, we must have metal detectors or wands to make sure that as people are coming in, they're not armed. Lastly, we need to have something really important. It's called the good guy with a gun. Whether that be teachers that are armed and trained at the law enforcement facilities, or whether that be private security or officers on duty, we need to have armed officers as a presence on our school campuses. Some of the forward-thinking ideas are to have police stations like a substation in our schools. This way there's a shift change that happens there on the campus, and there would be officers around all the time. This is just one idea. Now, there's another thing that no one really likes to talk about, which is threat assessment on the front end, and also to stop the bullying. We also have to be very attentive to some of the needs of our students. If we have students that are suffering depression or mental illness, we need to address those on the front end so that we don't have to address them on the back end. I am in support of all of these measures. Friends, something that's gone on in this country over the past decade or so is we've seen a deterioration of our rights as citizens in a couple of different ways. One is in our faith, in our heritage, and in our values. Friends, we've actually had people go to jail and be fined for their faith. This is unacceptable. We've also seen a deterioration of the family and the spreading of many other ideas. One of the things I promise as your congressman is I will defend family values and I will defend our faith and our heritage.
This includes protecting the life of unborn children.
Here in District 18, we've always had a bit of a struggle with the economy. It's important that as I go to be your congressman, I will fight to get jobs to come to the area. But not just any kind of job, good jobs. There are several ideas that we have on the table, but let's be honest, we do live in paradise, and the taxes are pretty cheap in Florida, so this should not be a hard sell. I don't understand why our current congressman and those in the past have not been a stronger advocate to bring business here. You know, I'm running for two main reasons. One is to be a good representative from the population. I was born here, raised here, grew up on the Treasure Coast. This is my home and I find it important. I want to increase the quality of life in education and in healthcare as well. These are important issues to all of us, and I promise as your congressman, I will do just that. Lastly, the primary reason why I'm running is accountability. If our representatives promise us things and they don't follow through, then they need to step down. And if they will not, then one of us needs to run against them. So I hope I will have your support. On August the 28th is the primary, and then on November the 6th is the general election. I'm looking for your support, and you can find out more about me at davecummings.org. Find me on Facebook at Dave Cummings for Congress and Twitter at Dave Cummings FL. And I thank you for your support. God bless.
Paid for by Dave Cummings for Congress. My name is Dave Cummings and I approve this message. All pictures, articles, and videos were obtained from the public domain.